The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Karam Yoga, Chapter 5. We help ourselves, not the world. Part 2. Our duty to others means helping others, doing good to the world. And why should we do good to the world? Apparently, to help the world is really to help ourselves. We should always try to help the world. That should be the highest motive in us. But if we consider well, we find that the world really does not require our help at all. This world was not made that you or I should come and help it. I once read a sermon in which it was said, "All this beautiful world is very good because it gives us time and opportunity to help others." Apparently, this is a very beautiful sentiment. But is it not a blasphemy to say that the world needs our help? We cannot deny that there is much misery in it. To go out and help others is therefore the best we can do, although in the long run we shall find that by helping others, in reality, we are only helping ourselves. As a boy, I had some white mice. They were kept a little white box in which were little wheels. And when the mice tried to cross the wheels turned, and the mice turned, and the mice never got anywhere. So it is with the world and our helping it. The only help is that we get moral exercise. This world is neither good nor evil. Each man manufactures a world for himself. If a blind man begins to think of the world, it is either as soft or hard, or as cold or hot. We are a mass of happiness or misery. We have seen that hundreds of times in our lives, and as a rule, the young are optimistic while the old are pessimistic. The young have life before them, while the old complain their day is gone, hundreds of desires which they could not fulfill struggle in their hearts. Both are foolish, nevertheless. Life is good or evil according to the state of the mind in which we look at it. It is neither by itself. Fire by itself is neither good nor evil. When it keeps us warm, we say, "How beautiful is the fire." When it burns our fingers, we blame it. Still, in itself, it is neither good nor bad. Accordingly, as we use it, it produces in us the feeling of good or bad. So also is this world. It is perfect. By perfection is meant that it is perfectly fitted to meet its ends. We may all be perfectly sure that it will go on beautifully well without us, and we need not bother our heads wishing to help it. Yet we must do good. The desire to do good is the highest motivating power that we can have. And if we all know the time that it is a privilege to help others, we will not stand on the high pedestal and take 5 cents in the hand and say, "Here, my poor man." But rather, we will be grateful that the poor man is there, so that by making a gift to him, we are able to help ourselves. It is not the receiver that is blessed, but it is the giver. Be thankful that you are allowed to exercise your power of benevolence and mercy in the world, and thus become pure and perfect. All good acts tend to make us pure and perfect. What can we do at best? Build a hospital, make roads, or erect charity asylums. We may organize a charity and collect 2 or 3 millions of dollars, build a hospital with 1 million, give with the second give balls and drink champagne, and of the third let officers steal half and leave the rest finally to reach the poor. But what are all these? One mighty wind in 5 minutes can break up all your buildings. What shall we do then? One volcanic eruption may sweep away all our roads, our hospitals, and our cities and buildings. Let us give up all this foolish talk of doing good to the world. It is not waiting for your help or my help, yet we must work and constantly do good because it is a blessing to our own selves. That is the only way we can become perfect. No beggar whom we have helped has ever owed a single cent to us. We owe everything to him because he has allowed us to exercise our charity on him. It is entirely wrong to think that we have done or can do good to the world, or to think that we have helped such and such people. It is a foolish thought, and all foolish thoughts bring misery. We think not that we have helped some man and expect him to thank us, and because he does not, unhappiness comes to us. Why should we expect anything in return for what we do? Be grateful to the man you help. Think of him as God. Is it not a great privilege to be allowed to worship God by helping our fellow men? If we are really unattached, we should escape all the pain of vain expectation and can cheerfully do good work in the world. Never will unhappiness or misery come through work done without attachment. The world will go on with its happiness and its misery through eternity. There was a poor man who wanted some money, and somehow he had heard that if he could get hold of a ghost, he might command him to bring money or anything else he liked. So he was very anxious to get hold of a ghost. He went about searching for a man who could help give him a ghost, and at last he found a sage with great powers, and he sought his help. The sage asked him what he would do with such a ghost. "I want a ghost to work for me. Teach me how to get hold of one, sir. I desire it very much," replied the man. But the sage said, "Do not disturb yourself. Go home." The next day the man went again to the stage and began to weep and pray, "Give me a ghost. I must have a ghost, sir, to help me." At last the sage was disgusted and said, "Take this charm, repeat this magic word, and a ghost will come, and whatever you say to him he will do. But beware, they are terrible beings and must be kept continually busy. If you fail to give him work, he will take your life." The man replied, "That is easy. I can give him work for his entire life." Then he went to a forest, and after long repetition of the magic word, a huge ghost appeared before him and said, "I am a ghost. I have been conquered by your magic, but you must keep me constantly employed. The moment you fail to give me work, I will kill you." The man said, "Build me a palace." And the ghost said, "It is done, the palace is built." "Bring me money," said the man. "Here is your money," said the ghost. "Cut this forest down and build a city in its place." "That is done," said the ghost. "Anything more?" Now the man became frightened and thought he could give nothing more to do. He did everything in a trice. The ghost said, "Give me something to do or I will eat you up." The poor man could find no further occupation for him and was frightened So he ran and at last reached the sage and said, "Oh sir, protect me, protect my life." The sage asked him what the matter was, and the man replied, "I have nothing to give the ghost to do. Everything I tell him, he does in a moment, and he threatens to eat me up if I do not give him work." Just then, the ghost arrived and saying, "I'll eat you up." And he would have swallowed the man. The man began to shake and begged the sage to save his life. The sage said, "I will find a way to help you out. Look at the dogs with a curly tail. Draw your sword and quickly cut the tail off and give it to the ghost to straighten it out." The man cut off the dog's tail and gave it to the ghost, saying, "Straighten that out for me." The ghost took it and slowly and carefully straightened it out. But as soon as he let it go, it instantly curled up again. Once more he laboriously straightened it out, only to find that it had curled up as soon as he attempted to let go of it. Again he patiently straightened it out, but as soon as he let it go, it curled up again. So he went on for days and days until he was exhausted and said, "I was never in such trouble before in my life. I am an old veteran ghost, and never before I was in such trouble. I will make a compromise with you," he said to the man. "You let me off, and I will let you keep all that I have given you, and will promise not to harm you." The man was much pleased and accepted the offer gladly. This world is like a dog's curly tail, and people have been striving to straighten it out for hundreds of years. But when they let it go, it has curled up again. How could it be otherwise? One must first know how to work without attachment. Then one will not be a fanatic. When we know that this world is like a dog's curly tail and will never get straightened, we shall not become fanatics. If there were no fanaticism in the world, it would make much more progress than it does now. It is a mistake to think that fanaticism can make for the progress of mankind. On the contrary, it is a retarding element, creating hatred and anger and causing people to fight each other and making them unsympathetic. We think that whatever we do or progress is the best in the world, and what we do not possess is of no value. So always remember the instance of the curly tail of the dog whenever you have a tendency to become a fanatic. You need not worry or make yourself sleepless about the world. It will go on without you. When you have avoided fanaticism, then alone will you work well. It is the level-headed man, the calm man of good judgment and cool nerves, of great sympathy and love, who does good work and so does good to himself. The fanatic is foolish, has no sympathy. He can never straighten the world, nor himself become pure and perfect.